Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place that takes your sources, your notes, all that research, and boils it down to the really important stuff. Think of it as your shortcut to being in the know, hopefully with some surprising facts and maybe even a little bit of humor along the way. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating book. It's called You Have More Influence Than You Think: How We Underestimate Our Power of Persuasion and Why It Matters by Vanessa Bones. And our mission for you, the listener, is to explore these, profound but often inevitable ways you actually impact people around you, probably far more than you realize. We'll look at why we tend to underestimate this influence and, what that means for your daily life, from tiny requests to big decisions. Get ready for some real aha moments, I think.
The invisible impact, how you influence without even trying.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The core idea, right, is that we often feel kind of unseen, maybe ineffective. But the reality, the book argues, is that just our presence, our words, our actions, they're constantly influencing others, even when we have no clue.
Yeah, and what's really striking is how often we hold back positive stuff, like compliments or gratitude. The author talks about this study by Amit Kumar and Nicholas Eppley, social psychologists. They had people write gratitude letters, to parents, teachers, friends, people who mattered. And the participants consistently thought the recipients wouldn't feel that good getting them. They really underestimated the positive impact.
And they overestimated the awkwardness too, right?
Exactly. They thought it'd be way more awkward for the recipient than it actually was.
That resonates. I mean, the author's own story about the NICU nurses.
Yeah.
The ones who were amazing with her daughter.
Oh, yeah.
She told everyone how great they were, friends, family, colleagues. But not the nurses themselves. Not until months later with a thank you note. It just shows how we all kind of fall short sometimes in actually telling people.
We really do. And this connects directly to a key concept in the book: the invisibility cloak illusion. It's this inherent bias we have. We tend to believe others are watching us less, listening less, just generally paying less attention than they really are. We feel, invisible.
That feels so counterintuitive sometimes, though. Like, don't we sometimes feel like everyone's staring?
We'll get to that. But first, this illusion. Think about that story with the lawyers, Ty Cobb and John Dowd.
Oh, the Mueller investigation ones, yeah.
Right. They were on a restaurant patio talking really loudly about super sensitive White House stuff.
Because they just didn't think anyone was listening.
Pretty much. They were operating under that invisibility cloak.
Yeah.
And guess what? A New York Times reporter was at the next table, scooped the whole story.
Wow. Just wow.
Yeah. And researchers, Erica Boothby, Margaret Clark, John Barg, they actually coined the term. They did this study in a busy dining hall. Students estimated others were watching them 67% less than they themselves were watching others.
67%. That's huge.
It is. Everyone's looking around, but we each feel like we're the only ones not being watched. It's partly because of gaze deflection. You look away quickly if you get caught looking.
Yeah. Definitely do that.
And we assume others do it too, so we figured they didn't really see us.
Okay, so if we're walking around thinking we're basically invisible, how does that even let us gauge our own influence? We're starting from a false premise.
Exactly. Which brings us back to your earlier point. If we feel invisible, why do we sometimes feel hypervisible, like when we do something embarrassing?
Right, like everyone's staring right at your stain or your bad haircut.
That's the spotlight effect.
Ah, the embarrassing T-shirt study. Is that it?
That's the one. People wore a Barry Manilow shirt or sometimes Pablo Escobar as something noticeable and potentially embarrassing.
Okay.
They thought about twice as many people noticed the shirt as actually did. So when we're self-conscious, we feel that spotlight is way brighter than reality.
So spotlight effect when we're self-conscious, but invisibility cloak illusion the rest of the time.
Pretty much. The spotlight effect happens when we're vividly aware of ourselves, maybe feeling awkward, but just, going about our day. We underestimate the attention. People will probably notice your cool old band shirt or just how your presence shifts the mood in a room more than you think in these subtle, unseen ways.
And it's not just noticing things like shirts. It's like our presence itself can change things. The author talks about listening to her husband's favorite band. Alone, she thought it was. Just okay. But then on a road trip, listening to the same playlist together, even in silence, suddenly it was so much better.
Yeah, that fits perfectly with Boothby's research again on how shared experiences are amplified.
Even without talking.
Even without talking, just sitting quietly with someone, listening to music or looking at art, it changes your experience. There's this theory of mentalization.
Okay.
It suggests that knowing someone else is experiencing the same thing makes you simultaneously imagine their experience, and that, in turn, intensifies your own. That's pretty cool.
It really is. And this influence thing, it's definitely not a one-way street, is it? We think of the person up front, the teacher, the speaker, as having all the influence.
Right, but the audience, they have a huge, often unseen influence back on the speaker.
Yeah, how so?
Well, think about performers, opera singers, comedians. They are acutely aware of the audience. Patti LuPone, the Broadway star, she famously grabbed a phone from someone texting during a show
Oh, I remember that.
because she was that aware, that tuned in. Comedians like Hannah Gadsby or Jerry Seinfeld, they talk all the time about reading the room, adjusting their sets based on laughs or silence.
Okay, that makes sense for performers. What about, say, politicians?
Same principle, really. It's called audience tuning. Politicians like Hillary Clinton or Mitt Romney, they phrase things differently depending on who they're talking to. Maybe more moderate for a general audience, more specific for a base rally.
So it's not just pandering, it's actually the audience shaping the message.
It seems to be. And it gets even deeper with the saying is believing effect.
Saying is believing.
Yeah. When a speaker tunes their message for an audience, over time, they can actually start to believe that tuned message more strongly themselves. Trevor Noah had that joke about Donald Trump's build the wall line, suggesting it started as maybe just a bit that got a huge reaction, and then it became this core belief.
Wow, so the audience reaction actually solidified the speaker's own conviction.
That's the idea. It shows how powerful the listener can be.
So a question for you listening. Who has your ear? Who might be tuning their message just for you? And how might that be influencing what they come to believe? It's a fascinating feedback loop.
Absolutely. And another big one, often overlooked, is behavioral contagion.
Like catching a cold.
Sort of, but with behaviors. Think about solar panels. One person installs them, then suddenly more pop up on the street.
Ah, okay. Keeping up with the Joneses, maybe.
Partly, but it's also just seeing someone do it normalizes it. Makes you think, maybe I should do that. We underestimate how much our neighbors notice our actions and are influenced by them, even silently.
And this ties back to just being there, right? Even without contributing much,
No.
like the junior faculty example.
Exactly. They wonder if they should even bother going to meetings if they don't plan to speak. But the author argues their mere presence matters. Others in the room see them, they might unconsciously tune their own comments, consider how the junior faculty might react. Even silence has influence. 2. The power of asking. Unlocking your hidden persuasion.
Okay, so that's the passive, invisible influence. Let's shift gears now to active influence, specifically asking for things, something most of us really don't enjoy doing.
Right. We dread that potential no. We build it up in our heads. But the book makes a strong case that we're way too pessimistic about people saying yes.
How so?
Well, the author's own research is a great starting point. She had people ask strangers at Penn Station to fill out surveys.
Okay, that sounds awkward.
Totally. And the participants thought it would be really hard. They predicted they'd need to ask like 20 people just to get 5 surveys done.
And the
They only needed to ask about 10. People were almost twice as likely to say yes as the askers expected.
oh, twice as likely.
Yeah. And this wasn't just for surveys. It held true for borrowing a stranger's cell phone, even for bigger asks like raising money for charity, like with those team and training volunteers. Often the biggest barrier isn't the other person, it's our own fear of asking.
I love that story she tells about the road trip with her husband,
Yeah.
needing a tire repair.
Oh, yeah, the closed shop.
Exactly. The shop's closed, lights off, but the mechanic is still inside. Her husband's ready to just give up, drive away.
Mm-hmm.
But she insists, let's just ask. And what happens? The mechanic helps him out, even though he was technically closed, just because she asked.
It's such a simple, powerful example, and it brings up an interesting question. Does offering money make a difference? Like if you offer someone $1 for that survey?
You'd think it would, right? Sweeten the deal.
Intuitively, yes. But the research suggests not really. Offering a small amount of money didn't actually increase how many people said yes compared to just asking nicely for the favor.
Huh. So what's the money doing then?
It seems like the money makes the asker feel better, less awkward, maybe less guilty about imposing.
Ah, so it eases the asker's discomfort, but doesn't necessarily sway the person being asked.
Exactly. For the person being asked, the request itself, the small favor, often just isn't the big deal we imagine it to be.
Okay, what about the size of the request? Surely asking for something big is harder than asking for something small.
That's our gut feeling, for sure. But again, the research is surprising. People underestimated compliance just as much for asking someone to fill out a long questionnaire as they did for a short one.
Really?
Yeah. And even for massive asks like university fundraisers asking deans for millions in donations, The fundraisers braced for the worst people getting angry, storming out.
Did that happen?
Almost never. Turns out, people were often kind of flattered by the big ask. It signaled importance.
So, if it's not always about generosity, and the size isn't the main barrier, why do people say yes so often? Why is it hard to say no?
Okay, this is crucial. It's something called insinuation anxiety.
Insinuation anxiety.
Saying no isn't just neutral. It can feel like you're implying something negative about the request or the requester, like, I don't trust you, or your request is unreasonable,
Yeah.
or even, I'm not a helpful person.
So refusing feels like a social slight.
It often does. It creates awkwardness. It can be genuinely more uncomfortable, more face-threatening
Right.
to refuse than to just go along with it. Remember that classic smoke-filled room study?
Vaguely.
Yeah.
People didn't report smoke.
Right. Smoke fills the room, but if other people who are in on the experiment don't react, the real participant often just sits there coughing rather than risk the social awkwardness of being the first one to speak up or leave.
Wow. Rather endure smoke than potential embarrassment.
Powerful stuff. Or think about the Milgram shock experiment.
Oh, I definitely remember those. Very disturbing.
Very, but relevant here. When the authority figure, the experimenter, was right there in the room, 65% of participants went all the way, delivering the highest shocks.
Yeah.
But when the experimenter gave orders over the phone from another room, compliance dropped to just 20%.
So it was much harder to disobey, to say no face to face.
Exactly. Challenging someone directly, especially someone perceived as having authority, is incredibly difficult for most people.
And this has big implications for how we ask for things, doesn't it? Like email versus in person.
Huge implications.
Yeah.
Asking someone for something in person is estimated to be 34 times more effective than asking via email.
34 times. That's massive.
It is, because email lets the other person off the hook easily. They can ignore it, delay responding, avoid that direct, awkward no face-to-face. You have to confront the request and the asker. We just really underestimate how potent that in-person connection is.
So, okay, maybe the takeaway here is we worry too much about finding the perfect words, being super articulate when we ask.
I think so. The book talks about people being cognitive misers.
Meaning lazy thinkers.
Basically. We don't process every single word someone says. We remember maybe 10%, and mostly focus on the gist, the overall message. Remember Ellen Langer's copy machine study?
The one about cutting in line?
That's it. People asked to cut in line at a copy machine. If they gave a reason, even a totally nonsensical one, like because I need to make some copies, compliance shot up to 93%.
Just having a reason, any reason was enough.
Pretty much. It suggests the act of asking and having some kind of justification matters more than the specific words. This fits with fuzzy trace theory.
Okay.
We process the exact words verbatim and the general meaning, gist, but the gist sticks around longer. So even if you stumble a bit, if your core request is clear and maybe you seem genuine, people get the main idea.
And people are generally just inclined to agree. Is that part of it too?
Yes, communication is fundamentally cooperative. We have a default tendency to believe what others tell us, especially face-to-face. Actually, disbelieving someone takes effort, cognitive work. So often, we just accept.
Which means our opinions, maybe even casual ones, probably land with more weight than we think.
Especially on topics that aren't super controversial, yes. Your view likely has more influence than you assume.
Interesting. And what about how we ask? Does being really assertive help?
You'd think so, right? Especially if you feel like you're not being heard. The instinct is to turn up the volume.
Yeah, get louder, more forceful.
But research, like the work by Anne Cronrod on health advice, suggests that can backfire. For people who aren't already receptive, commanding language like Nike's "just do it" can be less effective. It can make people dig their heels in.
So yelling doesn't work. Shaker.
Right. Gentler suggestions, framing things as options, often works better for persuasion in those cases.
Now, obviously, this isn't about tone policing, right? Like telling marginalized groups facing real oppression they should just be nicer.
Absolutely not. Anger, directness, loudness, those are completely valid and often necessary responses to injustice. This advice is more for, everyday interactions, trying to convince a friend to try a new restaurant or gently nudge a family member towards a healthier habit. In those contexts, calming down might actually be more persuasive. 3, the double-edged sword, dark sides and responsible influence.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the upsides, or at least the neutral aspects of this underestimated influence.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a downside, right? If we don't realize how hard it is for people to say no to us.
Exactly. That opens the door for some pretty problematic stuff. Inappropriate requests, maybe even unethical ones. It definitely has a darker side.
Like what?
Well, the author did these studies. They're quite striking. They had participants ask strangers to do things like tell a small white lie for them, or even vandalize a library book by writing the word pickle in it.
They ask strangers to write pickle in a library book. Serious.
Seriously. And the askers predicted maybe 28% would agree. They thought most people would say, no way. A shocking 64% actually did it.
64%
Yeah.
agreed to vandalize a book.
Yes. Even though many expressed discomfort, they still went along with it. Because saying no, directly refusing the person standing right there, was apparently even more uncomfortable than writing pickle in a book.
Wow. That has some really serious implications, like for unwanted advances, especially at work.
Absolutely. Think about the discussion around the Aziz Ansari story, or that fictional story cat person that went viral. They really highlighted this dynamic, where someone, often a woman, goes along with something they don't really want to do because saying no feels too difficult, too awkward, potentially unsafe. And the other person, often a man, can be completely oblivious to that internal struggle, that lack of enthusiastic consent.
They just see the compliance, not the discomfort behind it.
Exactly. And the author's own research on unwanted workplace romance backs this up. Suitors consistently underestimate how hard it is for the target to refuse, how uncomfortable it makes them, and how much it negatively impacts their work.
And women are generally more aware of this.
Generally, yes, often, because they've unfortunately been targets more frequently. They understand that dynamic from the other side.
And this isn't just about romance, is it? You mentioned job interviews earlier.
Right. Think about potentially illegal questions, asking about marital status, plans for kids, religion.
Things they're not supposed to ask.
Correct. Recruiters sometimes ask these things casually, maybe trying to build rapport, make small talk.
But the candidate feels trapped.
Totally. They feel obligated to answer, worried that refusing might seem hostile or uncooperative and could cost them the job.
Is there data on this?
Yeah, studies show it's common. Like, one found 66% of medical residency applicants were asked potentially illegal questions, and 83% of them felt they had to answer.
That's deeply problematic. The interviewer sees it as chat. The interviewee sees it as potentially discriminatory.
Precisely. And it can genuinely affect hiring outcomes, or even make someone turn down a job offer if they felt uncomfortable or discriminated against during the interview.
Okay, another angle on the dark side. What about misinformation? Spreading stuff that isn't true.
Yeah, the author brings up the idea of bullshitting.
Which is different from lying, how?
The definition used here from philosopher Harry Frankfurt is that bullshitting is communicating without regard for the truth. You're not necessarily trying to deceive, like a liar is. You're just talking. Fill silence, sound smart, be entertaining. You don't particularly care if what you're saying is true or false.
And we assume others will fact-check us. Or just know we're riffing.
Often, yeah. But remember, people are cognitive misers. They default to belief, especially online.
Right. Online, things spread fast.
And what spreads fastest? Often stuff that's novel, surprising, emotionally charged, which unfortunately is often false information.
And we don't realize how many people actually see our posts.
We drastically underestimate it. One study found Facebook users underestimated their actual audience size by 73%.
73%. So when we casually share some bogus story,
far more people are potentially being misled than we ever imagine. It really highlights that dark side of underestimated influence. If you don't think people are really listening, or you assume they'll push back if something's wrong,
you're more likely to just toss out bad ideas.
Yeah.
Or inappropriate requests. Or misinformation.
Exactly. It shifts the burden onto the listener or the target to object, to correct, to say no, which, as we've established, is really hard for people to do.
Okay, let's talk about power more directly. You'd think people in power, bosses, leaders, would be super aware of their influence, like hyper aware.
It seems logical, doesn't it? But the research suggests something almost paradoxical happens. Power can actually make people more oblivious to their impact.
More oblivious? How does that work?
Well, the author shares the story from a summer job she had at a sleep lab, studying kids' circadian rhythms with a researcher named Mary Karskadon.
Yeah.
The young apprentices, like the author, were expecting these kids stuck in a dark basement for 2 weeks to be totally rebellious, chaotic.
Sounds reasonable. I'd rebel.
Right. But Karskadon, the experienced researcher, just calmly said, "These kids will do what you tell them. They probably won't tell you or complain. They will just go along with it."
Wow. She just knew they wouldn't push back against the authority figures.
Exactly. And the theory is that people in power often make less effort to see things from others' perspectives because, frankly, they don't need to as much. They're less dependent on subordinates.
They don't need others' approval in the same way.
Right, and they feel freer to act on their own desires, less constrained by social norms or worrying about how they're perceived. Researchers have said a powerful person's whisper sounds like a shout to those with less power.
That's a potent image. It makes me think of that awful strip basketball story at Rutgers.
Yeah, with Coach Bannon. Having players take off clothes for missed free throws.
He apparently claimed it was optional.
But for the players, like Josh Sankus, who spoke out about it, coming from the coach, the guy who controlled their scholarships, their playing time, their whole future, it absolutely did not feel optional. It felt like a command. The emotional toll was huge.
The coach was likely oblivious to the coercion inherent in his position.
It seems very possible. And you see similar dynamics play out in workplace relationships between bosses and subordinates, even ones initially framed as consensual.
Like the Katie Hill case or the McDonald's CEO Steve Easterbrook.
Exactly. Even if it starts mutually, the power imbalance makes genuine, ongoing consent incredibly fraught. The lower power person feels immense pressure, explicit or implicit, to comply because their career is on the line. Monica Lewinsky's experience is probably the most famous, stark example of that power differential and the wildly disproportionate consequences.
And the person in power might even misinterpret things, right? Like mistake deference or friendliness for actual romantic interest.
That's another layer of complication, absolutely. Their powerful position can warp their perception of how others are reacting to them.
How does this connect to broader societal power structures, like race?
It's a similar dynamic. The author discusses the racial reckoning after George Floyd's murder and incidents like Amy Cooper in Central Park. For many white Americans, it was genuinely eye-opening.
Because they hadn't seen or understood that reality before.
Largely, yes, because in many Western societies, whiteness often functions as the invisible default, the norm. This can allow white people, consciously or unconsciously, to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about racism or their own privilege. They haven't had to see it in the same way.
So is being powerful doomed to make you oblivious? Or can leaders be aware?
Oh, absolutely, they can be aware. Power doesn't have to lead to obliviousness. The book mentions Ralph Willard, the coach Josh Sankus played for after leaving Rutgers.
What was different about him?
Willard apparently focused intensely on attunement to people's feelings, on building trust, on understanding his players as individuals. He wielded his power differently.
So it comes down to how you view your power.
That seems to be the key insight. Do you see power as an opportunity, a chance to do what you want, pursue your goals with fewer constraints? Or do you see it as a responsibility, a duty to consider the impact you have on others?
And those who see it as a responsibility are more likely to be mindful.
Exactly. They're more attuned, more likely to think about their influence and try to use it thoughtfully. 4. Seeing, feeling, and experiencing your influence.
Okay, so we've established we underestimate our influence and that power can make it worse. How do we actually fix that? How do we get better at seeing our own impact?
The author suggests 3 main strategies grounded in research: seeing, feeling, and experiencing your influence.
Okay, let's take those one by one. First, seeing your influence.
Right. This is about getting outside your own head, literally changing your perspective. When we think back on interactions, especially arguments or conflicts, we usually remember them from our own first-person view.
Makes sense. It's our memory.
Sure, but that perspective can blind us to how our actions might have prompted the other person's behavior.
How so?
There's this fascinating inducer study. Participants told another person whether to give liberal or conservative answers to questions. They knew they were dictating the answers.
Okay.
But afterward, they still tended to believe the answers reflected the responder's actual political beliefs. They ignored their own role as the inducer.
Wow. So even when we know we caused it, we still attribute it to the other person.
Often, yes. The suggestion is to try visualizing past interactions from a third-party perspective, like watching a movie of yourself and the other person. It can help you see the whole dynamic more objectively, including your part in it.
Okay, that's seeing. What about feeling your influence?
This one is about getting perspective, which is different from just taking perspective.
What's the difference?
Well, taking perspective is trying to imagine yourself in someone else's shoes, which sounds good, but often we're not very good at it. We project our own thoughts and feelings onto them.
We think we know what they're thinking, but we're just guessing based on ourselves.
Pretty much. Studies with romantic couples, for instance. They asked people to guess their partner's opinions on various things. Some just imagined, others actually asked their partners first.
Yeah.
The ones who asked were way more accurate. But here's the kicker. Both groups, the guessers and the askers, were equally confident in their accuracy.
So asking works better, but imagining feels just as convincing to us.
Exactly. We overestimate our mind-reading skills. Getting perspective, in contrast, means actively seeking information from the other person.
So less imagining, more asking and listening.
Precisely. Become a better questioner, a better listener, like a good journalist or interviewer. Actively gather their story, their viewpoint. Listen to those difficult narratives, #MeToo stories, #Black and Thyvory experiences, rather than assuming you understand based on your own life.
Got it. See it from the outside, get information from the inside. What's the third one? Experiencing influence.
This one is about, well, direct experience, putting yourself out there and seeing what happens. This leads to things like rejection therapy.
Oh yeah, Jia Jiang did that, right? The guy who filmed himself getting rejected 100 times.
That's him. Popularized by Jason Cumley, too. Jiang intentionally sought out rejection, asking for crazy things just to overcome his fear. He documented it all online.
And what did he find? Did he get rejected constantly?
He definitely got some rejections. But what was surprising, even to him, was how often people were polite or negotiated or sometimes even said yes to wild requests, like asking to make announcements on a Southwest flight.
No way.
Yes. He became a total convert, realizing, as he put it, he could fulfill his life dreams just by simply asking. The experience showed him people were far more willing to help or engage than he'd ever believed.
That sounds potentially life-changing.
Yeah.
But does that work the same way for everyone?
That's a really important question the author raises. Jiang and Akumli are men, one Asian, one white. Does seeking rejection feel the same or yield the same lessons for people from marginalized groups who already face systemic bias and rejection, or for women who are often socialized differently about assertiveness?
Right. The stakes might feel different.
Exactly. The author talks about a woman named Haley who tried rejection therapy for a BBC show. She also noticed people hesitated to say no, but her takeaway wasn't just push harder, like Jiang sometimes seemed.
What was her lesson?
She learned to not push, and importantly, to give people space to feel comfortable rejecting you. To read the cues, respect the hesitation, rather than just bulldozing towards a yes. It highlights how our backgrounds and experiences shape what we learn from these encounters.
That makes sense. And experience alone isn't always the best teacher anyway, right? We can misinterpret things.
Definitely. There's the bad is stronger than good. Bias, we remember failures and negative experiences more strongly. And a few experiences can trick us into thinking we understand something complex.
Like the library vandalism study again.
Perfect example. Some participants who did that study concluded, wow, people are just unethical because they saw people agree to write pickle.
But they missed the real point.
They missed the deeper insight that it wasn't necessarily about ethics, but about the immense social pressure, the difficulty of saying no in that moment. So experience needs reflection to yield true understanding. Outro.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway here? If there's one thing to remember from this deep dive.
I think the core message is pretty straightforward, but really profound. You have more influence than you think, period. Both when you're trying to persuade and maybe even more so when you're not trying at all.
Just by existing, basically.
Yeah.
Your presence, those offhand comments, the simple requests you make, they're all constantly nudging and shaping the people around you.
Yeah, we've really explored that gap, haven't we? Between what we think we need to do to have impact, like being super eloquent or forceful, and the actual, often invisible influence we wield just by being ourselves, day in and day out.
People are more likely to say yes than we guess. Our words land harder than we realize. Even our silence speaks volumes, especially if we're in a position of power.
But, and this is crucial, that unseen influence comes with unseen responsibility.
Right, because it's easy to avoid responsibility if you don't think you have any power in the first place.
Exactly. We assume others will object if they disagree, or just brush off our inappropriate comments or requests. We shift the burden.
But knowing now how hard it actually is for people to say no, how much they're paying attention, how readily they might accept what we say, it demands a different level of awareness, doesn't it?
It really does. A new level of mindfulness about our impact. It's about recognizing the power you inevitably have and then choosing consciously to use it thoughtfully, ethically.
So maybe the final thought for you, our listener, is this. The next time you're about to ask for something or share an opinion or even just walk into a room, take a pause.
Consider how are you going to wield this influence you have, this often invisible, surprisingly strong influence? Not just to get what you might want, but to actually build better, more respectful, more positive connections with the people around you.